Before we begin, let us be clear about what this is and what it isn't. This is not an accusation. Nothing in this story alleges that any individual named has broken a law. Business people make deals. Mining companies acquire licenses. That is what they do. But here is what the Jamaican people have a right to know. When one man, through one company registered offshore, accumulates mineral exploration rights over more than a third of your country, you should be told. When a $75 million mining deal is signed on Jamaican soil by companies whose founders trace back to the same two corporations that end up with the minerals, you should be told. When core samples are cut from Jamaican rock, packed into boxes, and shipped by air freight to a laboratory in Canada, you should be told. When your government collects a 5% royalty, while foreign companies take 75 to 80% of what lies beneath your feet, you should be told. The question is not whether these deals are legal. The question is whether they were made in your interest and whether anyone bothered to ask you. Transparency is not a favor. It is a duty, and it belongs to the government of Jamaica, to every minister who signed a license, to every official who approved an extension, to every representative who accepted a donation and said nothing. The facts you're about to hear are not hidden. They are buried in stock exchange filings in Toronto, in company registries in London, in geological reports published in English for investors who do not live here. Every transaction was disclosed, just not to you. This story changes that. "20 kilometers north of Old Harbour, in the hills around Bellas Gate, St. Catherine, drills are turning. Not for bauxite, not for limestone, for copper and gold. A Canadian company called C3 Metals is running an 8,500-meter diamond drilling program across 13,000 hectares of Jamaican land. One of the biggest copper and gold producers on earth, Freeport-McMoRan, an American company worth over $60 billion, just committed $75 million to the project. $75 million US, and most Jamaicans have never heard of it. But here's the part that should concern you. It's not just that this is happening, it's how it got here. Because the story of Bellas Gate didn't start with C3 Metals, and it didn't start with Freeport. It started with licenses, and the man who collected them. His name is Robert Stewart. Most people know him as Bobby. He is the eldest son of the late Garden Butch Stewart, the man who built Sandals Resorts, who founded the Jamaica Observer newspaper, who built the ATL group that sells you your cars and your appliances and your Starbucks. Bobby left the family hospitality business around 2017. He registered a company called Geophysx Jamaica Limited. He didn't register it in Jamaica. He registered it in St. Lucia. He is the sole shareholder. And then Bobby started collecting. Between 2017 and 2024, Geophysx acquired over 70 special exclusive prospecting licenses from the Jamaican government. Every single one approved under the current JLP administration. 4 consecutive ministers signed off: Mike Henry, Robert Montague, Audley Shaw, Floyd Green. 70 licenses, roughly 4,000 square kilometers. That is approximately 37% of Jamaica's total land area. One man, one offshore company, more than a third of your country's mineral rights, and you never heard about it. Now here's where the Bellas Gate story gets interesting, because the minerals under those hills didn't just appear on somebody's radar last year. International companies have known about this area since the 1990s. BHP, one of the biggest mining companies in the world, did early exploration. Then the rights passed to an Australian company called Tiger's Realm Metals. Then in 2011 to a Canadian company called Karoob Copper. Now pay attention. Because Karoob Copper is C3 Metals. Same company. They changed the name. The company drilling in Bellis Gate right now has been sitting on these Jamaican projects since 2011. They brought in an Australian partner, OZ Minerals, who spent $6.5 million exploring the area. Now look at who built this company. The co-founder, Jeff Ackert, spent 6 years as a mine geologist at Barrick Gold, one of the biggest gold miners on the planet. The man who eventually ran the company, Stephen Hughes, he spent 12 years at Freeport-McMoRan's giant Grasberg mine in Indonesia. He also worked at Tiger's Realm, the same company that held the Jamaica licenses before Karoob, and at OZ Minerals, the partner that spent millions on Bellis Gate. The co-founder came from Barrick. The CEO came from Freeport. Keep those names in your head, because what happens next splits into 2 roads, and both of them lead through the same man. 2 roads, 1 gatekeeper. Road 1, Bellis Gate. C3 Metals kept Bellis Gate for themselves. They held on to it. 13,000 hectares across 3 prospecting licenses in St. Catherine. That project never left C3's hands. Then in February 2025, Freeport-McMoRan, the company whose former executive helped build C3, committed $75 million to earn up to 75% of Bellis Gate. That's the project being drilled right now. Road 2, the other licenses. In 2019, while C3 was still called Karoob, they sold 6 separate mineral exploration licenses to a company called Geophysx Jamaica Limited. The price, $210,000. $210,000. That's the price of a modest house in Kingston. There was an additional $240,000 payable, but only if commercial production ever begins. A condition that could take a decade or never arrive. And who owns Geophysx? Bobby Stewart, the eldest son of the late Butch Stewart, the man who built Sandals, the Jamaica Observer, and the ATL Group. But Bobby didn't stop at those 6 licenses from C3. Between 2017 and 2024, he accumulated over 70 prospecting licenses directly from the Jamaican government. Every single one approved under the current JLP administration. 4 consecutive ministers signed off, 70+ licenses, roughly 4,000 square kilometers, 37% of Jamaica's land area. 1 man, 1 offshore company, registered in St. Lucia, and then Bobby flipped them. In 2024, Barrick Gold, the co-founder's old employer, got an earning on roughly 400,000 hectares of Bobby's Geophysx licenses, up to 80%. Now here's where it switches back, because Bobby didn't just walk away with those licenses. He walked right back through the door he came out of. Bobby and C3 Metals entered a 50-50 joint venture on something called the Super Block Project, adjacent to Bellis Gate. The same company that sold him the licenses is now his business partner. And this is not hidden. On C3 Metals' own website, right now, today, they describe Geophysx as the largest mineral tenure holder in Jamaica. C3 is telling you on their own project page that their joint venture partner controls more mineral rights than anyone else on the island. It's not an accusation. It's not a conspiracy. It's on their website. Then Bobby spent $1.2 million buying out C3's remaining interest in 3 other zones. Then Bobby bought 5% of C3 Metal stock through a private placement. Read that again. C3 sold Bobby the licenses. Bobby turned around and became C3's partner. Then Bobby became C3's shareholder. The licenses went out, and the relationship came right back. He didn't just buy in, he switched back. He went from customer to partner to part owner. He now owns Geophysx, the license holder that feeds Barrick, and he owns part of C3, the company that feeds Freeport. Both sides of Jamaica's mineral wealth run through one man, Barrick and Freeport, the old employers of the men who built C3, both end up with Jamaica's minerals. And Bobby Stewart is sitting in the middle of every single transaction, on both sides of every table. He is the gatekeeper. So let's talk about what's left for Jamaica. On the Bellas Gate side, Freeport-McMoRan gets up to 75%. C3 Metals keeps 25%. Bobby owns 5% of C3. On the Geophysx side, Barrick gets up to 80% of 400,000 hectares. Bobby keeps 20%, and Jamaica, 5% royalty on mineral extractions, plus whatever tax revenue the government can collect, 5%. The copper and gold come out of Jamaican soil. The clear samples are shipped to a laboratory in Sudbury, Ontario, Canada for analysis. The profits flow to Phoenix, Arizona, Toronto, St. Lucia, and the people of Bellas Gate and St. Catherine, the people who live on top of these deposits. What consultation have they had? What environmental protections are in place? What happens to the water, the farmland, the roads when the trucks start running? Has anyone asked them? Here's maybe the most important part of this story. Everyone knows about cockpit country, the bauxite, the protests, the maroons. It's been in the news for years. People marched, lawyers filed suits. International media showed up, but Bellas Gate, the copper gold project that could reshape St. Catherine, the 70-plus licenses covering a third of the island, the son of the most powerful business family in Jamaica, controlling it all through an offshore company. Silence. The Jamaica Observer, the newspaper founded by Bobby Stewart's father, covered the Barrick gold deal with Geophysx as routine business news. No disclosure that the subject of the story was the founder's eldest son. No questions about how one man ended up with 37% of the country's mineral exploration rights. The information has always been there. It's in TSX venture filings in Canada. It's in the Mines and Geology Division Register. It's in C3 Metals press releases. It's in UK companies' house records. All public, all accessible. It just hadn't been assembled, and nobody with a platform was assembling it, because the family that owns the platform is the family at the center of the story. Drills are turning in Bellas Gate right now. Core samples are being packed into boxes and shipped across the ocean. $75 million is flowing into a project most Jamaicans cannot name. This is not a conspiracy theory. Every fact in this story comes from public records, corporate filings, and the company's own announcements. The transactions were disclosed, buried in stock exchange filings and government registers that nobody reads. The question was never whether the information existed. The question is why nobody told you.
This is Accompong Network News. Like, share, and subscribe, and stay connected with Accompong News.